September 27, 2022. I have a few more videos coming. Another one today, possibly another one after that today, but this goes back to my video a few videos ago where I talked about this for the first time. Well, not the first time I talked about this, but the first time I gave a illustration to go with this theory I've had for a long time on this channel. Theory that not every physical thing is made of another physical thing. And okay, so you can recall a few videos back I gave an illustration of how this would have to be the case. So I'm going to give a different illustration which I believe is superior to that one. So it's a simple principle, really. You have a magnifying glass, right? Let me just make this easier for the neurotypicals who find these concepts very hard to grasp in this analogy that I'm giving, right? Okay, so you have two magnifying glasses in this illustration. Just take it as if it's the same magnifying glass, right? And the thing in the center is the atom. The ball is the atom. But it's looking at I know that magnifying glasses can't actually see atoms, okay? And don't try to twist my words and, make it seem like that's what I thought was the case. Like, I don't actually think magnifying glasses are enough to see atoms. It's just I'm just using a magnifying glass in the picture instead of whatever it can because it's a lot easier to draw, just to evoke the idea. The idea is if you had something that a tool you could use to see an atom, you could see it, but you would keep seeing into it so far that the process would go on for infinity if every atom had an infinite number of atoms in it. It would be a paradox, because that would be like, this thing weighs infinity. Like, I'm carrying infinities. I'm carrying an atom that has an infinite number of weight in it, even though it only weighs, say, 10 pounds, a billionth of a pound or something. Or the same logic applies to any object. An object that is like this height, like 5 feet tall, well, it has a finite number of atoms in it, because every atom that's in it can't have an infinite number of atoms in it. Otherwise, it's not a 5-foot object, it's an infinity-foot object. So at some point, the chain stops. I mean, you could keep going with more magnifying glass and keep looking in every atom and every atom and every atom for infinity. But like I said, that would be a paradox, as the way I just described. Therefore, like I was saying, the chain stops at some point, and yet, if this is how it would be, then eventually you have an atom, and then you look in the magnifying glass and you see it. Let's say, once you do, you see this one, and then you see this one, and this one, and this one. You keep going smaller, and they all appear to be the same size the further you go. And it's just like forever. Well, then, how do you know that's really the case? Because like there's no space between atoms. All there is atoms. But that's, a paradox. Because because that would mean inside of every atom, there's an infinite number of atoms, and that's mathematically impossible. And also, that would mean that it would make more sense to say that, like I was saying in that other video, you have an atom, then all its outer layers, but then eventually it stops. The chain stops at a really small point, and then there's just nothingness. There's nothingness in the center, for example. And in this nothingness, it's not antimatter, and it isn't matter, and it isn't quarks, it isn't leptons, it isn't anything physical, because those are all physical things. Even antimatter is. It doesn't matter, because like I said, even antimatter is matter, so even anti-atoms are atoms, so it doesn't matter. Like I said, physicists, scientists, like I already said this, they'll come up with anything to work around the idea that I'm saying here, that there'd just be patches of absolute nothingness. They'll come up with all kinds of things that don't help prove their point at all. People would just be retarded enough to believe this stuff. I mean, it's not like there's just, once the chain stops, there's nothing physical. And if there's nothing physical, then there has to be something, right? Except no, there doesn't. If it's not physical, but there's something, it's something immaterial. But if it's something immaterial, then how are we walking inside of the immaterial? So if it's something immaterial, then it's absolute nothingness, since absolute nothingness is immaterial. Or so I thought. Remember, even absolute, actually no, because absolute nothingness can't be immaterial, because absolute nothingness cannot do anything. Absolute nothingness has no abilities, because the immaterial is something. The absolute nothingness is not. Like by definition, absolute nothing equals not immaterial. Immaterial equals something. I should also add not something to this definition. Not absolute nothingness, not something, not immaterial. If it's not something, then how can it be immaterial? Which is something? It would be contradicting each other. If absolute nothingness was something while also being not something. So, therefore, we either walk inside of the immaterial, which is already a paradox, since the immaterial has no atoms. And if there's no atoms, then there's no location. When we walk inside of, space, it's made of atoms. But if you take away those atoms, then what's left? It's no coincidence that when we take away, in the original situation here, when the chain ends, there's no more atoms. And so, if you want to say it's immaterial, fine, but we're walking inside the immaterial, but it's not like we're walking in something physical. So, whatever the case is, we're not walking in something physical, we're just walking in something completely, either something immaterial, or walking in nothing itself, which is in either case a paradox, especially if we're walking in something in nothing. But if we're walking in the immaterial, it already doesn't make any sense, since, again, you can walk inside a location, but a location is physical. You can't walk in a non-location, because a non-location is not physical. You can't walk in anti-location, sorry. If you walked in anti-location, then you're not walking inside of something, because the only thing you can walk inside of is a location. Like, the only thing that can be walked inside of, according to the laws of physics, is a location. Anything that's walked in is a location. And if you walked in something and it wasn't a location, then it's just a paradox. So, if all this were to be consistent. So, that's my best current way, different way from before of explaining this with an illustration and with my own words. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know if you thought it was interesting. Really, the big kicker here is just that once I can, obviously make them neurotypicals believe that it could be that we're walking absolute nothingness. They'll still at least be able to resort to saying we're walking in the immaterial. But yeah, I mean, if you want want to say there's patches of the immaterial in the universe, fine, but then it's just a paradox. Because then, like I said, it contradicts the laws of physics with location and stuff, and it also is just like, that also means that you're touching the immaterial. You're touching what isn't physical because you're walking inside of it. And you're moving inside of, well, I mean, you're pretty much, if you're moving in patches of absolute immaterialness in the center, and it's like parts of you're touching the immaterial because you're actually like, you know what I'm saying? It's like the immaterial can't be touched because it's not physical. And when we do touch something, it's because what we're touching is physical. But if we're, at least according to the laws of physics and logic, but if we somehow defied these set of laws and rules, then I guess we could just touch what is immaterial, even though it's not physical and it has no atoms, which is just completely, obviously contradictory. But it's a paradox, like the many it's paradoxical, like I've talked about these other paradoxes. But that's all for now. Please like, share, subscribe. I'm out. Bye.